Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for submitting questions. You may have seen us playing around with a bit. That's because there were duplicates. We also don't necessarily have time for all the questions, but hopefully we've got a good selection to interest you. And thank you very much for submitting them. Okay, so I'm going to start with a more general question. So this is for each of you. What can we do as a community to help you? Who's going to start?
If you're a library maintainer, then you should upload your project to Minko's repository. I've forgotten the URL, but if you were around during the week and during this week, then you would know what it is. Go and look on the videos and make sure that it builds with and works with NGCC, because that's going to then help the rest of the community and all of the people who use your library make the transition to Ivy much cleaner.
That repo has been moved to the Angular organization, so it's easier to find now.
Yeah, but even more generally, just checking out Ivy, testing your application and finding any issues if you come across any problems now would help us so that we have less stress after the main release.
Speaking of issues, when you write an issue, make it as simple as possible and explain specifically what do I click on, what do you expect, what should actually happen, because a lot of times I look at issues and I'm like, I have no idea what you're trying to say. So assume I'm an idiot, that's a pretty good assumption, and go from there. Like, the simpler, the better.
Like, if your StackBlitz has a folder with a bunch of components in it, you've gone too far. Yes.
Come on, this was for all of you.
I would say if you maintain a library, just kind of feel the responsibility toward the community. So like make it useful, but also make it right and like profile it. It's just like many people rely on your work to have like a good time. So just, you know.
So to continue on what Miško said, it's very important that if you have a bug, to provide a reproduction.
Small reproduction.
Yeah, yes.
Tiny.
Did I mention small?
The minimal code needed to reproduce your problem. And if you don't actually provide a reproduction in a Git or StackBlitz, just in code, always provide the version of what your node version is, your CLI, your framework, etc. Because you might be reporting an issue that it was fixed in a patch version that was just released.
So for me, if you want to contribute to Angular, I would highly recommend going through the pull requests because it allows you to see basically what a certain change needs for the code that's behind that, which really helps in understanding what needs to be done for getting stuff changed. So that would be it for me.
I already answered about the Ivy. I'll let others talk.
All right. I'll just add on to what we just say. We have more than 1 million developers. You can count how many of us are here on the stage. So be engaged, be involved with the community. Go and help other people on issues on Twitter or whatever. You see somebody else who's newer than you in the community, become the local leader, do a meetup. Basically, the only way to scale to 1 million people is if we have thousands of experts below and thousands below and so on. Yep.
And I want everyone in this room to try out Ivy, because there's a lot of us, and everyone on the live stream, because I think we can write some pretty crazy code and catch every possible edge case so that no matter what we write in the future, it'll continue to work.
Yes, I think maybe some documentation, help him to write some documentation, even the example or some exact usage will also help the other users to use Angular better.
Yeah, so I think for me, again, the top thing would be submitting issues and having good descriptions so that we can easily reproduce and locate where the issue is and fix it. But also, what Jolly said, if you are looking to contribute to help, there are simple stuff that you can do, like fixing something in the docs that you read and you see a typo or a tiny thing, and even if it seems tiny, it's a great help for us. So don't be afraid to submit even a fix for a thing that that seems trivial.
Tell us when something doesn't work, clear instructions, minimum viable reproduction, like Miško was also saying. Even better, please fix it and submit a PR.
Rado actually kind of touched on what I wanted to say, which is keep being awesome to each other. I love being in the Angular community. You guys are and girls are some of the most fantastic, respectful, amazing people to work with. And it just, on a day-to-day basis for me, it's really motivating to work on a framework that has such an amazing and loving community. So thank you all.
Talk to each other. Oftentimes, engineering ends up getting overly focused on the technology and the choices and the code. But every time you open up and talk to someone and share your problems, share your successes, you're going to benefit from that.
Are you saying they should connect?
Angular Connect, yeah.
You all took everything. I'll extend on what was said about issues. Yes, minimum viable issue or reproduction of issues. And if we feel like it didn't quite make sense to us and we ask for reproduction, please provide that reproduction. There are a lot of issues that get opened and somebody is like, this problem's happening and here's why. And then we're like, well, we don't quite know. Can you do this thing? And then we never hear back, which just leads to a lot of orphaned issues. So follow up on those things, I guess.
Oh, and of course, from a non-technical point of view, kind of building on what Stephen and some others said, you can always try running an Angular conference, because that will help bring everyone together and learn more about Angular. And if maybe that's a little bit too big a jump, then you could start by running a meetup or going to a meetup and helping it and giving talks. So it's a lot about the community as well as just the technical things that you can do to help us as a team.
Cool. Okay, so just worth saying, we've had a lot of questions on this, which we've combined. So I18N, which is internationalization.
Nation. Yeah.
What's the actual status about the Angular I18N implementation? Any update on runtime I18N?
The buck stops here. No. So we've answered this question a couple of times at various points during the day. So apologies if I'm repeating myself, but internationalization is going to be an important part of Angular v9. We are putting in place the basic machinery to support a new pipeline for making translations faster and more versatile for you as developers. I'm not going to go into the detail, but the main point that you should take away is that we are going to be providing primitives which you will be able to build upon, people in the community or maybe us within the team, to add features. The difficulty about talking about runtime translation is it means a lot of things to lots of people. Like everyone I spoke to had a slightly different view on what it means. So we need to spec that out, work out what's appropriate for us to build and what's appropriate for the people in the community or even individual app developers to build. But our aim is to provide a basic level that you can build upon while still maintaining backward compatibility with V8. It's a bit general, but this is a big panel.
I'm just going to add that we really care about internationalization. And actually in the keynote, I had like 3 slides all about internationalization. We were running over time, so I deleted them. And I've been regretting it for the last 2 days because all the questions we got were about internationalization. So we care about it. We're going to be on par with what we have today in V9, but it's going to be much faster. And we are designing in a way that will enable runtime internationalization, but as Pete said, there's more design work before that is out.
I just wanted to add a little bit to it, which is that keep in mind that our first step is to just replace what we already have, so all the new features will come later. So it's not that we don't think runtime is important, it's just it's not strictly required to be backwards compatible with what what Vue Engine is. So that's why we're doing that thing first, and after that's done, we're going to do other things afterwards.
Oh, and the last thing I'd say is the conversations I've had in the last 2 days have been really informative for me, being involved in the implementation of this stuff. So if any of you are regularly using internationalization and have a view on how you would like to be able to use it, then please get in touch with me. And I'd really appreciate your views because it will help us guide our future designs.
Great. So we heard in the keynote about Ivy and the plans for when that was going to be released. The question is, what's up next?
I guess I can take the one. So in version 9, it's all about enabling Ivy for applications. Version 10, enabling for libraries, and also starting to build up on the internal APIs that Ivy enables. I showed some of the examples of that in the keynote. We have some exploratory work going on related to the server-side rendering and the hydration of server-side rendered code. Many other experiments are going on. I don't want to go too much into details because we don't know. We don't want to commit to any particular features just yet. Ivy is still the #1 priority, and getting that out is what we are focused on. So that's the primary focus now.
Cool. Where do you draw the line between useful performance optimizations versus unnecessary micro optimizations? Should I care about monomorphism in day-to-day development? Surprise, surprise.
It's a complicated question. I think the short answer is that in most cases, when you write your application code, you should make it look simple, maintainable, and usually the VM does the right stuff. Now, for something like a framework, we're in a little bit of a different boat for a couple of reasons. One is usually we have to call into the application code, and we call into the application code, we always call it from the same location. Like we have a piece of code that's responsible to call ng on init, and so it is responsible to call everybody's ng on init, which means that that particular call site becomes megamorphic. And so from our point of view, it matters what we do for optimization there, but it probably is not the same problems that you face as an application developer. So it's good to understand these things. It's good to kind of enlarge your understanding of how the VMs work and sometimes consider like, hey, something's behaving strangely. What could it be? So it's nice to have this kind of knowledge. But I would say for most cases in application development, this is just not an issue. It's a lot more interested to make sure that the code is simple, maintainable, first. Second is if something is not running fast, usually it's just some macro optimization that is off, and you should focus on that first. And then micro optimizations such as megamorphic calls and inlining, they do matter, but it usually only matters in super tight code, which just is running over and over. Like, for example, for us, it matters for change detection, right? It's rare that such code would be written by the application. It's possible, and so that's why it's useful to know, but it usually doesn't happen.
Don't forget to measure and profile.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, like I think like if there would be like one advice is just open a profiler, like record the profile and have a look at it, because most of the time there's like one or two like very obvious things that just jump at you, like they are like literally screaming and saying like just go and fix me. And it's just like they don't have a chance because people just don't open a profiler. So like #1 performance advice is actually measure.
Okay, so it's been really interesting to hear during the conference about the inner workings of the Angular team. What was your motivation behind this transparency?
Transparency is very important. Transparency also extends beyond code. Angular is a lot more than just code. So when you understand the internal workings of something, and also understand the rationale behind some of the decisions and choices we make, you tend to trust it more, you work with it better, and you become more productive. That was the motivation. Do you know?
Yeah, I would add, at least from my perspective, another part of it is demystifying how things work so that it's more approachable. If you actually understand the inner workings of our team, then our team doesn't seem scary. I worked on the components sub-team for a while before focusing more on framework stuff, and I was scared to submit anything to framework, and I sat next to everyone. So I can't imagine that for everyone else, it's got to be even more scary. So making ourselves making our project more approachable is definitely a goal of that.
I also find it interesting when somebody sends a PR and says, "Why can't you just merge it? It takes you 2 seconds." And you go like, "Actually, it does not."
Merging takes 2 seconds. Everything before merging takes days.
Well, the actual clicking the button, but like everything before and after and Google 3 and like all these pieces. So by understanding all these things, it's easier to understand that there's, things are not quite that simple as you think they are.
Okay, so this question is for as many of you who want to answer it. What's your favorite Angular release and why?
I like @next because you can just put that in your package JSON and then you're always on the latest Angular and you always have the best features. Nothing can go wrong there.
Why not at head or master?
I'm not crazy.
But that's what Google uses.
Yeah, we do test that it always builds an NPM package, so you should be good on master, actually.
Maybe I'll take the leap.
Yeah. For me, it's the releases we made along the way, however that saying goes.
I personally really liked 8.0 just because differential loading is, I think, really a fantastic manifestation of this idea that we can make Angular better by tweaking your apps and how they build and how they ship without you having to do anything that makes your apps better and delivers better user experiences. I think if we could do that in every release, make your apps better and not have to change anything, we're going to do that.
Woo.
And to get a little bit sentimental, my favorite release is 0.10.12. Because this was when I first started using AngularJS, and it's like when I first started interacting with the Angular team and meeting these guys. And, I'm really upset. No, it's been a wonderful experience, and like that was the moment when I joined the parade. So it's been fantastic ever since.
For me, it's the one that we already released because that's when all the work is done and people get to enjoy what we've done. But if I had to call one out, I think V6 was pretty cool because that's when NG update came out, and that really made it much easier for people to stay up to date.
Is that it? No one's going to say the future one then, where you get to delete all the...
I love all my children. Equally.
So someone's commented that Angular material was hardly a topic. Can we get a status update?
Sure. So Angular components as a whole is mostly heavily focused on creating. I'm blanking entirely on the name of them, on testing harnesses, sorry, and then building those testing harnesses for the material components themselves, as well as moving our material components on top of the materials design team's MDC components, so that we can stay completely up to date with what the material design itself is. I think that's the main focus that's been happening for the team. The reason why it wasn't specifically talked about is when we planned who was going to come here, I was on the components team, so I was going to do that. But now I'm focusing on dev infra, so we didn't have a components talk.
Okay, fair enough. What advice would you give to a project team that's just about to start upgrading a medium-sized project from AngularJS version 1.7? Very specific.
Oh, I guess I can answer some of this one. You want to take it? Oh. Mostly because I'm on AngularJS 1.6, so not 7, so there's a little difference between there. But at least the advice that helped my team the most is to plan out how the components interact with each other. So if you migrate them, at least from bottom up, there's a couple different approaches, but knowing what the dependencies are and really thinking of your project as a whole when you're going about migrating it, it helps reduce the burden at least halfway through, saying, oh no, I messed it up, it's not a good order, and I made my life more complicated. Do you have more, George?
So I just wanted to say that Ivy doesn't change anything in that regard, so it's not something that should add extra work or something. And we keep working on ng upgrade and adding small features that will make that work easier for you. And maybe the work on ng upgrade has slowed down while the focus is on Ivy, but with Ivy up, there will be more work on that. There has been some changes that would make testing easier, like when you test services with some helpers. But other than that, there's not something that hasn't been mentioned before. And planning out and having like your Angular JS application be in a good state, writing the best Angular JS application that you can before you start the upgrade would make it a lot easier.
Also, what I've seen teams be successful with is convert the root of the application to Angular as soon as possible so that you can lazy load AngularJS and build most of the application, the main screens with Angular and the least frequently pages. You can then lazy load AngularJS, lazy load the rest of the application and still keep it running.
Cool. So as speaker yourselves, what are some of your favorite blogs, podcasts, or any other resources that you could share with us? That's open to anyone.
Is that technical ones or generally anything?
Whatever you want.
We are. I like a podcast called The Partially Examined Life. It's a philosophy podcast. Yeah.
My kids love Wow in the World. If you have kids, it's awesome. It's science done in a very humorous way, specifically targeting kids. But it's funny for adults too.
For me, it would be Angular in Depth. If you haven't heard about it, it's an awesome forum to learn about advanced Angular stuff. So really, I do recommend you go visit there. Thanks, Max.
I would say Google Talks, especially ones that are focused on the brain science and psychology, and like it has like surprisingly huge impact for me as as a developer. You would say like it's all about languages and frameworks, but like we've got our brain, we kind of need to understand how it works. So there are like excellent Google Talks on this.
It might sound silly, but Twitter. Like, I know it's old and like it's probably going to be over in the next couple of years, but for now, web development is still very, very active on Twitter. So just ignore all of the trolls and just look for great articles and content that people are sharing.
Yeah, I totally agree with Stephen that Twitter is a good source of information and to keep yourself up to date if you follow the right people.
Cool.
I really like to listen to NPR One, which is a podcasting application that suggests podcasts from all around the world, and you get to be exposed to many different disciplines. It's not just of engineering; it can be psychology, whatever, history, and I find especially history very fascinating. There are so many things that happen for a reason, and we just see the artifacts now and don't understand how it happened. So knowing why we are somewhere where we are and how certain things happen is very informative.
Anyone else? No, good.
Cool. I like how you said things happen for a reason, not things happen for good reasons. I like that.
I think we just avoided saying many of the potential Angular-related ones just because there's so many great ones out there that if we picked out too many individual ones, it would be unrepresentative. So that's probably why we all generally tended to steer onto the more general sides of things just to be safe.
Fair enough. So other than Ivy, what other features for version 9 is a team excited about?
One of the features that I'm really excited about is the simplicity to build universal. So previously we had to call the server builder, and then after the server builder there was another Webpack build, and now it's just one. So the server builder now can build your server TS and your whole server part. So one build does it all. We can also enable bundling of dependencies on server and hopefully coming soon, optimizations of JavaScript on the server as well.
Yeah, most of the team was really focused on Ivy, and Ivy is the V9 primary feature. So there are smaller improvements. We're going to improve dependencies, update dependencies. So like TypeScript updates, RxJS updates, stuff like that. But we're not working on any bigger features in V9 besides Ivy, because Ivy is big enough by itself.
So to keep on the components topic, we are adding two components: the YouTube player, the component that actually reaches in and does the YouTube iframe API management, as well as a Google Maps component.
Cool. Are you still working on improving the bundle size and performance?
Yes.
Next question.
I could expand on that, I guess. Yes, we're still working.
Is that like YES?
So yes, we're still working on the bundle size. Specifically, we want to look a bit more on more of our fixed costs. So one thing that Ivy already does extremely well is we've reduced our variable costs. So the code that we generate for you is much, much smaller than it used to be. So now we're kind of going back and cleaning up because kind of a natural consequence of moving some of the logic to the runtime and by dividing all of our functionality up into more pieces with the instructions, naturally it's going to get a little bigger. So now we're kind of going back, reviewing everything that we've done and trying to reduce the size of the framework. That's going to improve it.
You can also talk about your cool work you did with gzip.
We're also working on compression and making it compress well. I don't think they want to know the details.
Cool. What tool would you suggest to use for end-to-end testing of an Angular application?
So as you probably know, Protractor is the default solution in CLI. This is because WebDriver testing is the primary way to test applications at Google. We actually did a deep dive into Cypress versus WebDriver testing for uses in Google and determined that we cannot afford moving away from testing against real browsers just because we have so many mission-critical applications that need to be tested on real browsers. If you don't know, Cypress is Chrome only for now, and unless that changes, we cannot start using it for internal purposes at Google. So we know that Cypress provides many benefits when it comes to the open experience, speed, and some reliability. So if you can afford testing only on one browser, you can install Cypress into your project and start using it for end-to-end testing. If you want to test against real browsers, if that's your business requirement, then Protractor and WebDriver are the best choices.
Okay, so we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. Is there a way to get custom decorators shakeable with Ivy?
So repeat that?
Oh, you want me to repeat it? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get custom decorators tree shakeable with Ivy?
Tree shakeable. Okay. It's probably not a great idea to be writing custom decorators right now. And the reason for that is because the spec is still evolving and might change a little bit before it lands in its final form. The problem with tree shakeability in custom decorators is actually a problem at the language level. The way they have to be down-leveled right now into both ES 2015 and ES5 make it hard for the optimizers to kind of make good decisions around decorated classes. And part of it is just the fact that a decorator is almost by definition a side effect. Like it's going to be changing the class and kind of doing operations based on its implementation. So yeah, I would wait until the decorator spec is finalized, and at that point the optimizing tools should get a little bit better at dealing with them. There's not really much we can do in Angular to make that experience any better at the moment.
Okay, and so our last question. Optimized runtime code inside Ivy is very interesting. Is it tuned for V8? Is it fast on IE or other browsers as well as Chrome? Try and keep that to 5 minutes, the answer. or less, you know, because it's quite an easy question.
So I will start. I think Miško will add to it, but it's definitely not tuned for V8. It's just I think the performance tracking tools are like the best in Chrome, I guess, right now, and all the tooling around V8 is just the best, unless like I'm not aware of something. So it's just like the easiest for us to understand what's going on inside the virtual machine using those tools. But I believe that most of the optimizations that V8 is doing is like the principles are the same in all the browsers. Like megamorphic calls will be slower in all the browsers. So there is a possibility that, like, you know, one artifact of our of us using V8 as the primary tools, that we will do a specific optimization, which is like, you know, targeting V8. But I don't believe we should be slower in our other browsers.
No, in general, these techniques that the VMs use are well known, and they are used across, not just in JavaScript, they're used in Java or any other VM system that you happen to have. So this is not specific to even a language, not even a browser. So this is just a standard set of tricks that the VM authors use to deal with these particular problems.
Thank you. So I think, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So can we hear it for the Angular team? And thank you very much for being so transparent.